Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing some Halloween dupes, starting out with this super simple skeleton candle holder from Pottery Barn. To make these candle holders, I grabbed 2 of these skeleton wine glasses or champagne glasses, whatever you want to call them, from Dollar Tree, and just removed the little plastic cups. I'll also be using these little candle cups. I already had these in my stash and they ended up fitting perfectly down in these hands. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take all of these pieces outside and give them a nice coat of some black spray paint. Now, since the Pottery Barn ones kind of look like iron or hammered metal, I am going to mix up a little bit of baking soda and some black chalk paint. So once the spray paint is dry, I'm going to go over these with that mixture of baking soda and chalk paint just to give them a little bit of texture. And once it's dry, all I had to do was glue the little candle cups down into the skeleton hands. This project is not a true dupe, but more inspiration from this decorative pumpkin that I saw at Michael's. I'm going to be using a jack-o'-lantern for this project. This is one that I already had. I actually made this last year, made the stem for it. I just painted over it with some black chalk paint. Then I thought it would be really cute to do a little decorative design around the jack-o'-lantern's eyes. And for this, I'm just using some air dry clay. And then I also have this clay mold. It is like a scroll work mold that I'm going to be using to wrap around the eyes. So it will look something like this. I'm just going to use some gel super glue and glue both sides onto this jack-o'-lantern. Now, once I had this finished, I realized I didn't really like the bottom part of the clay piece. So I ended up cutting both of those bottom pieces off and then added another tiny scroll piece. And once the air dry clay was dry, I took it outside and painted it with a coat of spray paint. This project is one that I found on Wayfair. I thought it was super cute, a little skull glasses holder, but it was $72, so I thought I could make my own. To start this project, you'll just need a Dollar Tree skull, one of the plastic ones, and all I did was cut off the back of the skull. Now you want to be sure to leave that bottom jaw part and just be very careful when you are doing this. You'll also need some air dry clay for this project, so we will be using that skull face for a mold. Starting out, I balled up a little piece of clay and I am going to start there at the very bottom all the way at the front of the face. Just start putting some clay in there until you have that bottom part finished. You can smush it all together and then keep working your way up with the clay and just keep smoothing all of those pieces with your finger. Make sure that the clay is really sticking to each other as you are putting these pieces in there. And remember, if your clay is feeling a little dry or just not really moving the way you want it to, you can add a little bit of water to your fingers to help smooth it out. I even used a craft stick to help me smooth it out in those smaller areas. Once you are happy with it, you can set it aside and let it dry for about 24 hours. After the 24 hours is up, you will notice that the backside is pretty dry. The front of this is actually going to still be a little pliable, so you can easily remove the skull piece from the clay. Just do it very carefully when you pull it out, and then you'll need to let the front of it dry for another 24 hours. Once the clay is completely dry, then I just went in and painted it with 2 coats of some black chalk paint. And once that paint was dry, I went over it with some European Gold Rub and Buff. For this dupe, we are going to be making an LED ghost painting. This one is from Kirkland's and it ended up being around $60, so we can definitely make one of our own. To start this painting, I'm using a 16 by 20 canvas on a wood frame. And the first thing I'm going to do is just kind of draw out my ghost shape. It doesn't have to be perfect, but this is pretty important because you do not want to paint your background color over your ghost. For the next step, I am going to use some black acrylic paint and go around that ghost shape that I made with that black paint to make the background. When I have the entire background painted, then I'm just going to use the little bit of paint that's left over on my brush, and I'm gonna make some little sloppy lines up and down the ghost. And this will give your ghost some definition later. Then I'm just gonna add a little bit of some creamy brown paint to the background, and this is just giving that background a little bit of highlights. So I'm just gonna brush that on very quickly, and then I'm going to use a large dry fluffy brush and blend that background in. I also added a little bit of that lighter brown color to the bottom of the ghost and pulled those colors up onto the ghost as well. Let all of that completely dry, and then you can go back in with some white acrylic paint and paint over your ghost with a very light coat. I also used what was left over on my brush to kind of make the spooky edges seem like they were flowing from the ghost. Then I'm going to use a little bit of yellow paint and just shape out the candle. I'll also use that same yellow color, blending it here and there with my white acrylic paint to do the glow from the candle onto the ghost. Once that's dry, then I'm going to draw out the wick and the actual candle flame. And I am very, very carefully going to cut out the flame. I highly recommend just scoring this on the front of the canvas and then flipping it over to actually cut it out. Once I have the piece of the canvas cut out for the flame, then I am going to cover it on the backside with a piece of wax paper. So I just cut down a piece of that wax paper, folded it over in two, and then I'm just going to use some Scotch tape to tape it to the back of the canvas. Then I flip this back over, and I'm gonna finish up that candle by adding a little brown holder at the bottom, just like the Kirkland's one. And I'm also going to go back over my candle and add in some more white acrylic paint to make it look like it's dripping and there is wax going down the candle. I also added just a little more yellow around the flame and actually painted over that wax paper a little bit too. Then I also just felt like it needed some more of the glowing candlelight, so I added a little bit of orange and blended that in with some white. To finish it off, I just added some little eyes for my ghost, and then on the back side of this, I taped down some fairy lights right behind where the candle is.